The Book of the Dead, a map through the underworld. When modern ears hear the phrase Book of the Dead, it can sound like a forbidden volume, a secret scripture, or a single ancient book hidden in a tomb. That is not quite what ancient Egypt has left us. The title we use is modern. The Egyptian title is often translated as the Book of Going Forth by Day, or the Chapters of Going Forth by Day. Already the emphasis changes. This is not a book about staying dead. It is a book about movement, emergence, and continuation. It imagines the dead person not as vanished, but as someone who must learn how to pass through danger, speak correctly, remember names, be transformed, be judged, and finally come out into renewed life. Even the word book can mislead us. The Book of the Dead was not one fixed text written by one author. It was a collection of spells, hymns, images, and ritual instructions copied in different forms for different people. One papyrus might contain one set of chapters, another might arrange them differently. Some were carefully illustrated, some left blank spaces for the name of the owner to be inserted. Some passages also appear on tomb walls, coffins, mummy wrappings, amulets, or burial equipment. So in this episode, when we call it a map through the underworld, we should hear map as a metaphor. It is not a geographical chart in the modern sense. It is a ritual map, a moral map, a map of names, gates, transformations, gods, dangers, and hopes. The underworld of Egyptian funerary imagination is often called the Duat, but the Duat is not simply hell, and it is not simply heaven. It is a place of night, passage, judgment, renewal, threat, and divine order. It belongs to the same religious world as Osiris, the dead king who becomes lord of the afterlife, and Re, the sun god whose nightly journey through darkness makes dawn possible again. The dead person entering this world is not passive. They must know what to say. They must know who stands before them. They must know how to pass a gate, how to answer a guardian, how to preserve the body, how to breathe again, how to avoid destruction, and how to be recognized as one who belongs among the blessed dead. This is why the Book of the Dead is so powerful as a historical source. It does not give us a simple story with a beginning, middle, and end. It gives us a working religious imagination. It shows us how ancient Egyptians linked text, image, burial, body, memory, and cosmic order into one passage from death toward continuation. But it also requires caution. There was never one Egyptian afterlife belief, unchanged for thousands of years. The material developed from older royal pyramid texts, then from coffin texts used by non-royal elites, and then into the New Kingdom papyrus tradition we call the Book of the Dead. Across this long history, access widened, images changed, spells were selected and reworked, and local traditions mattered. To read the Book of the Dead well is to resist two easy mistakes. The first is to turn it into fantasy, a cursed book, a spell book of monsters, a dramatic occult prop. The second is to drain it of wonder by treating it only as a list of funerary formulas. It is neither merely superstition nor merely literature. It is a record of how human beings imagined the most difficult crossing of all. One of the most famous scenes from the Book of the Dead is the weighing of the heart. In well-known papyri, such as the Papyrus of Ani, the dead person stands before a divine balance. On one side is the heart, on the other is the feather of Maat, truth, order, justice, rightness, the pattern by which the world should live. Nearby are gods and witnesses. Anubis tends the scale. Thoth records the result, Osiris presides. A composite devourer waits, often called Ammit, part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus. If the heart is too heavy with disorder, the person does not simply go to a place of punishment. The more terrifying possibility is annihilation, the loss of the hoped-for afterlife. This image is memorable, but it should not be isolated from the larger religious world. The heart was not just a symbol of emotion, it could stand for conscience, memory, identity, the inner record of a person. One spell asks that the heart not rise up as a witness against the deceased. The drama is not only legal, it is deeply personal. What if the part of you that knows you best speaks against you? The Book of the Dead also contains what scholars often call the negative confession, a declaration before divine assessors in which the deceased denies a range of wrongs. The exact interpretation is debated, and the text is ritualized, but the effect is striking. The afterlife is not only about magic, it is also about order. Violence, theft, falsehood, and social harm matter because the cosmos itself is moral. Yet we should be careful not to translate this scene too quickly into later religious categories. It is not simply the same as a modern courtroom, and it is not simply the same as later heaven and hell. It belongs to an Egyptian world in which body, name, ka, ba, tomb, offering, image, and divine order are all connected. The ka and ba are difficult to translate because they do not match one modern word for soul. The ka may be thought of as a vital essence, sustained by offerings and linked to the continuing person. The ba, often represented as a human-headed bird, can move, appear, and return. The preserved body, the tomb, the name, the images, and the rites all help the person continue to exist as a complete being. This is one reason mummification matters. It is not only a technical practice of preserving remains, it participates in a theology of continuity. If the dead are to be restored, if they are to receive offerings, if they are to be recognized, then the body and the social memory around the body matter. The opening of the mouth ceremony also belongs to this world. It is a ritual of animation, enabling the mummy or statue to breathe, speak, eat, and receive. The Book of the Dead does not stand alone on a shelf. It works with gestures, objects, priests, tombs, images, and the family's ongoing care. The journey itself is full of thresholds. The dead person may need to know the names of gates, guardians, and even parts of a doorway. To a modern reader, this can feel strange, but in the logic of the text, knowledge has power. Naming is not trivia. To know the true name of a being or place is to be properly oriented in a sacred landscape. It is to enter without being lost. This is why the Book of the Dead feels like a map. A map tells you where you are, what lies ahead, which path is safe, which crossing is dangerous, and what signs matter. The Book of the Dead does something similar, but with sacred speech. It maps a world where words, images, and identity must align. Many modern retellings make ancient Egypt seem obsessed with death. That phrase is common, but it is misleading. The Book of the Dead is evidence not of a culture that loved death for its own sake, but of a culture that gave extraordinary ritual attention to continuation. The goal is going forth by day. The dead hope to breathe, to walk, to be vindicated, to join the gods, to travel with the sun, to sit among the blessed, to receive offerings, and to remain themselves. The tomb is not imagined as an ending. It is a charged place where memory, family, image, body, and ritual connect the living and the dead. There is fear here, certainly. The underworld contains knives, gates, serpents, fire, hostile beings, and the possibility of failure. But fear is not the whole picture. There is also order, there is renewal, there is the sunrise, repeated after night. There is Osiris, who has died and yet reigns. There is Re, who passes through darkness and appears again. The Book of the Dead stands at the meeting point of those two hopes, the Osirian hope of becoming an effective, vindicated dead person, and the solar hope of renewed emergence. Different texts and images emphasize these patterns differently, but together they make death into a passage rather than a blank wall. For historians, the text is also valuable because it preserves social history. A papyrus was an object that had to be made. Scribes copied it, artists painted it, families or individuals paid for it. Workshop habits, wealth, local style, and religious preference shaped the result. Some copies are lavish and long, others are shorter or less carefully executed. The variation itself matters. This means the Book of the Dead is both intimate and institutional. It is intimate because it was made for named people, scribes, priests, singers of Amun, officials, women and men whose names survive because someone prepared them for death. But it is also institutional because it depends on temples, scribal training, inherited traditions, and shared religious language. The famous examples in museums can make the material feel frozen behind glass, but originally these papyri belonged to bodies, tombs, rituals, and families. They were not simply art objects, they were tools of passage. We can also see why later imagination seized on them. The images are unforgettable: a heart on a scale, a jackal-headed god, a devourer crouched beside judgment, a human-headed bird, boats crossing darkness, solar discs, gates, guardians, and beautifully ordered columns of hieroglyphs. They seem to invite mystery, but mystery does not require exaggeration. The real ancient material is already profound. It asks what must be preserved for a person to remain a person. It asks whether moral order is woven into the cosmos. It asks whether speech can protect, whether memory can sustain, whether ritual can guide, and whether night can lead to morning. If we call the Book of the Dead a map, then its destination is not a lost city beneath the sand. Its destination is transformation. The dead person hopes to become an an effective and transfigured being, one who has passed through danger and been made whole in the presence of the gods. And perhaps that is why the text still holds us. It is remote from us in language, theology, and ritual practice, but its central anxiety is recognizable. Human beings have always stood before death and asked what can cross the boundary. A name, a body, a record of one's actions, a prayer, a family's memory, a god's judgment, a path through darkness. The Egyptian Book of the Dead does not answer those questions in a modern way. It answers them in papyrus, paint, spell, image, and rite. It answers with a journey through the Duat, with a heart before the feather of Maat, with doors that open only when named, and with the hope of going forth by day. So the Book of the Dead is not really a book of death. It is a book against disappearance. It is a carefully made companion for the unknown road, a guide for the night passage, and one of the ancient world's most beautiful attempts to imagine that the dead might not simply be gone, but transformed, remembered, judged, and brought once more into light.